Coming up today, President Park Geun-hye orders South Korea's military to heighten its alert level against North Korea as the regime continues to ramp up its threats. With South Korea's general election under 3 weeks away, the official candidate registration period begins. Some big names leave the ruling party, but the main opposition's chief vows to stay on. First, as Europe takes stock after the deadly terror attacks that rocked Brussels, US President Barack Obama says Washington will go after ISIS until it's removed and destroyed. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Thursday, the 24th of March. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Broom. We begin with South Korea's response to North Korea's latest barrage of threats against the South and President Park Geun-hye. On North Korea's explicit threat of attacking South Korea's presidential office and the president herself, the presidential office of Chung Hwa-dae has ordered the South Korean military to up its alert level against what it called Pyongyang's challenge to the world. Let's take a look.
It's a challenge and threat to the Republic of Korea and our president, and a direct challenge to the world. Considering the severity of North Korea's threats, President Park has ordered to reinforce defense readiness to guarantee the safety of our people, and called on the public to prepare for any emergency.
Denouncing South Korea and the US's joint annual military drills, of which some have simulated an attack on the north, Pyongyang state-run media on Wednesday broadcast that it will remove South Korea's president, specifically targeting the top office with its military and special forces. Seoul's Unification Ministry on the same day responded that it will not overlook Pyongyang's terror threats and that the north should give up its nuclear ambitions and take the path to change. Now, North Korea claims to have taken another step forward in its nuclear and missile capability. In a new revelation, a US-based North Korea monitoring website says it has also identified the location of North Korea's nuclear warhead re-entry test site. Connie Kim with the details.
In what appears to be another stride forward in its nuclear and missile capabilities, North Korea says it has successfully conducted a solid fuel rocket test. The North's state-run Korean Central News Agency reported Thursday that Kim Jong-un made the comment while supervising the ground-based test on the rocket engine and its separation. Pyongyang has used liquid fuel to launch long-range missiles, but has not yet developed solid-fuel intercontinental ballistic missiles. As its name suggests, a solid-fuel rocket is a rocket with engine that uses solid propellants. Seoul's defense ministry confirmed North Korea is in the early stages of developing solid-fueled rockets, and its switch to solid fuel would allow North Korea to launch missiles frequently. If the claim is confirmed, it would also go against the UN Security Council resolution that bans the North from developing ICBMs. This comes as US-based North Korea monitoring website 38 North identified the location of the North's nuclear warhead re-entry technology testing site. Pyongyang released photos last week of Kim Jong-un overseeing the simulation, where he claimed the regime acquired atmospheric re-entry technology, but the regime did not reveal the location. Analyzing satellite imagery and the pictures released by the North, the website suggests the test was conducted from a vertical engine test stand at the Chamjin missile factory located southwest of Pyongyang. The test stand is reportedly capable of holding an engine for the Scud, a short-range ballistic missile, as well as a larger engine for the longer-range Dodong missile, although probably not a complete missile. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
The United Nations Human Rights Council has adopted a resolution on North Korea's human rights record in a bid to find ways to make the regime accountable for its crimes against humanity. The resolution, adopted by the 47-member forum in Geneva on Wednesday local time, sets up a group of experts that will look into ways to refer Pyongyang's leadership to the International Criminal Court in The Hague. The resolution was submitted by the European Union and Japan and condemns the North's crimes, including extrajudicial killings, torture and rape. The South Korean government says it welcomed the move, which it says shows the depth of the international community's concern about the North's human rights abuses. Turkey's president says one of the Brussels bombing suspects was captured in Turkey last summer and deported back to Europe. Recep Tayyip Erdogan at first did not name the attacker, but he was later identified as Ibrahim Bakroui, the older of the two brothers. Sources say the Turkish authorities detained, then deported Bakroui for using a similar route that is used by foreign militants attempting to join ISIS. European officials say they cannot jail people deported from Turkey without evidence of crime, such as proof showing suspects fought in Syria. Bakroui was one of the bombers that blew himself up at the airport in Brussels. His brother Khalid blew himself up on the metro. Now, officials in Belgium are tracking a third man seen in security footage with the two brothers amid growing evidence of a link between the attackers in Brussels and Paris. Najim Lashraoui is part of the same cell that carried out the Paris attacks and is the group's suspected bomb maker. And with the manhunt on in Europe, US President Barack Obama has vowed to aggressively go after the Islamic State militant group. Park Jong-hong reports.
U.S. President Barack Obama says destroying ISIS is Washington's top priority. He vowed to root out the militant group in the wake of the horrific events that unfolded in the Belgian capital this week.
The United States will continue to offer any assistance that we can to help investigate these attacks and bring attackers to justice. We will also continue to go after ISIL aggressively until it is removed from Syria and removed from Iraq and is finally destroyed.
Obama was speaking on Wednesday after a meeting with his Argentine counterpart in Buenos Aires. Describing the attacks as senseless, vicious violence, he urged the world to combine their efforts against terrorism.
The world has to be united against terrorism, and we can and we will defeat those who threaten the safety and security not only of our own people, but of people all around the world.
The remarks were President Obama's first extended reaction to the attacks in Brussels that killed at least 34 people. As the investigation continues, European security officials were quoted by the Associated Press as saying that ISIS has trained at least 400 jihadis and already sent them to Europe. The fighters have been instructed to strike when they determine the best time, place, and method. So far, the Brussels probe has found that the two suicide bombers who died in the blasts were brothers. They were known to have had connections to Saleh Abdeslam, who helped carry out the Paris attacks last November and who was captured last week by Belgian authorities. Officials say the Brussels airport will be closed until at least Saturday. They say it will have to remain shut while investigators continue their forensic investigation. Travelers planning to go to Brussels are advised to check with their airlines for further instructions. Park Jong-hong, Arirang News.
Now back here in Korea, and with just 20 days to go until the April 13th general election, the two-day candidate registration period kicked off this morning. And after a night of last-minute defections, the country's ruling party is retooling its nomination list. Shin Se-min reports.
Just an hour before the midnight deadline for candidate nominations, a string of key ruling Saenuri Party members announced they were leaving to mount independent bids in retaliation for being left off the nomination list. Included among them was Yoo Seung-min, who stepped down from floor leader post last July after President Park Geun-hye criticized him for settling a passage of a revision to the National Assembly Act with the main opposition party. The list also includes three-term lawmaker Chu Ho-young and Representative Lee Jae-oh, considered an opponent of the party's pro-Pak faction. With the departure, the ruling camp's leadership and nomination committee are going over their final list of candidates before registration ends Friday. The main opposition Minju Party of Korea and minor opposition People's Party have both confirmed their final list of candidates. Minju Party interim leader Kim Jong-in said the election should be a referendum on the current administration and its failure to boost the economy. The newly formed People's Party is vowing to turn the country's two-party structure into a three-party system and aims to secure 20% of the vote on April 13th. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Korea and France celebrate their 130th anniversary of diplomatic ties this year. The two countries have been preparing various events for the anniversary so that citizens can experience each other's culture without having to get on an airplane. President Park Geun-hye, in a congratulatory speech to the Korea-France Leadership Forum in Seoul on Thursday, said that France has been a friend to Korea even in tough times, and she hopes the two countries will continue to work together on solving humanity's challenges, such as climate change and poverty, for an all-round better world. President Park also said France could be a great partner in helping achieve her administration's initiatives of a creative economy and cultural convergence. Now, property prices have soared globally over the past 10 years. And while it's great news for those who already own their home, the problem is more and more people, especially the young, are finding it practically impossible to get onto the property ladder. Kim Min-ji reports.
Housing prices around the world have soared nearly 50% on average over the past decade. According to the Bank of International Settlements, Hong Kong saw the biggest jump. Hong Kong's property price index stood at 93.4 in the third quarter of 2005, but by the same period in 2015, the figure had surged to 305. That's up nearly 230%. To give that some context, if a house was valued at $3 million in 2005, it would be worth about $10 million 10 years later. Over the same period, Sweden saw its index jump nearly 92% and Norway nearly 83%. However, for the U.S., prices actually fell almost 5%, which is mainly attributed to a plunge in housing prices in the midst of the financial crisis in 2008 and 2009. In general, worldwide, it's becoming harder for households, especially the younger generation, to buy a home, as the growth in income has not been rising as fast. Online pricing database Numbeo says people in 59 out of 102 countries worldwide would need to save their yearly income for at least 10 years in order to buy a house in their country. Hong Kong topped the list yet again with a price-to-income ratio of just over 37.5. This means the average worker would need to work almost 40 years in order to buy a house of their own. Vietnam and Ghana followed in second and third. South Korea sat in at 32nd place. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Now, Apple and Samsung might have to start watching their backs because Chinese smartphone makers are expected to see strong growth this year on the back of rising demand in local and emerging markets. According to global research firm TrendForce, Chinese vendors are expected to expand their shipments by 15.6%, while global shipments are forecast to rise just 5.7% this year. Lenovo is expected to increase its annual exports by at least 20%. Huawei by 17% and Xiaomi by 12.5%. With strong demand from the Chinese makers, smartphone component suppliers in Asia are also experiencing a gradual rebound. TrendForce says shipments of application processors and DRAM chips have bounced back since February. Now, Korea confirmed its first case of the Zika virus this week, but the country really feeling the heat is Brazil. The number of confirmed microcephaly cases in newborns there has topped 900 in the space of just 5 months. Out of those cases, 122 were positive for the Zika virus. Brazil's health ministry is still investigating 4,300 suspected cases, with roughly a third traced to a state in the country's northeast. The least number of cases are in Sao Paulo, which has a better public health system despite the dense population there. The ministry says Zika infections have been reported in 22 out of Brazil's 27 states. It warned that cases of microcephaly, where babies are born with abnormally small heads, may spread quickly. The World Health Organization has forecast that cases of Zika-associated microcephaly in Brazil will exceed 2,500. Well, those are stories we've been following on this Thursday afternoon here in Seoul. For more of the latest, don't forget to check out the website arirang.com/news. We also have a smartphone application. You can just search for Arirang TV in the usual places. Business Daily with Lee Ji-yoon is coming up at 4 p.m. Korea time. And Daniel Che will be back with our next regularly scheduled newscast at 6 p.m. Korea time. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Goodbye.